Welcome to Lift Your Story podcast with guest Alexis Haselberger, time management and productivity coach. I'm Lorianne. I am that gal from Mississauga, Ontario, Canada, and I'm with.
I am that guy. I am Roy Miller from Dallas, Texas. Welcome to our Lift Your Story podcast.
So in this episode, we welcome Alexis Haselberger, and she is a time management and productivity coach. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Great. Okay, so most people say, I don't have enough time. No matter what it is, I don't have enough time. In your experience, is it that they don't have enough time or they don't properly use their time?
I think I'm going to give you a hedging answer. It's both, but I think this is the thing, right? We all get the same amount of time. That is not like we can make more time, right? So we have a set amount of time, and then we get to figure out how to use it. And so when we say we don't have time, like that's just unequivocally true, right? Like people who are ambitious and want to do a lot of things, like we will never get a chance to do all of the things that we want to do. Like we are all going to die with a big long list of things we didn't do, right? And like, that's just part of life. And so I think really what I try to tell people who say, I don't have enough time or I didn't have enough time to do that or whatever is that's not true. You just didn't prioritize it, right? And so I think for me, when I started shifting that language and I realized, I have a lot of agency over my time, it's just how you prioritize things. So I never say anymore, I didn't have time. I just say that wasn't a priority for me.
So I would imagine that there's a certain level of being aware. Like I was telling people, I used to be the Energizer bunny all the time, 100%. Now I'm 65%, 50 to 65, depending, and the rest of me is sloth. But I've realized that this is what I am. And so now I work my time, because would you say that certain times in your life, there's different, you have more energy to do more things. And then when you get older, you think you still need to do all that, but you have to kind of make room for not, if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, I do. Actually, I'm thinking about a client of mine that I have right now who is, she is, in her 60s. She owns a law firm. She is amazing and awesome. And she's also like, I can't work these 10-hour days like I used to anymore. And I keep telling her, yeah, but you don't want to. You keep telling me you don't want to either, right? so let's try to, I get that, we just get into these habits, right? And we think we're going to be able to just continue on. And then I think that the most important thing is that we be asking ourselves, does this align with what we want? How we're spending our time, does it actually align with our goals and our values in the moment? Because I think you're totally right. At different stages of life, we have different energy and different energy that we can commit to different things. It's like when I had really small kids, I had to put my energy in different places, right? Now that they're a little bit older, I can shift that because you know what? They're like preteens and they don't want to talk to me as much. And so, I can do other things. And so I think that knowing yourself becomes really important. And even just in a microcosm, right? It's like some people are morning people and they are really great in the morning and that's when they focus. Other people, like me, are night people and find getting up to be the hardest part of the day, right? And so we want to modulate how we spend our time and where our focus is based on who we are and what our life circumstances are.
Love that.
I worked for a guy who's a great guy to work for, but the one thing he never wanted to tell him is I didn't have time, because his answer was, hey, there's 3 8-hour work days in 24 hours.
Oh. Yeah. I don't know how I feel about that, right? I mean, I feel like, I like to think of myself as a very driven, lazy person. The reason that I can be really productive, right, is because I like to have a lot of time for myself. And so I optimize in that way. But I think the kind of culture of just work 24/7, trying to get as much done as you possibly can in any given, I think it's too much and it doesn't help us live life, right? Because there's always more work to do, right? You and I, we could work 2 of those, 8-hour shifts every single day for the rest of our lives. And there would still be a full day's work tomorrow, right?
Wow.
There's always more work. It never ends. And so we have to carve out that time, for life as well.
How does multitasking fit in with productivity and time management?
Well, it kills it. Multitasking is, this total myth that we've all been sold. People put it on their resumes, right? Fantastic multitasker. No, you're not. Nobody is. Nobody can multitask. It's like, it's not actually a thing our brains are capable of doing. What we're doing instead is we just task switch, we context switch really, really fast. And that actually depletes our energy. It depletes our motivation. It depletes our ability to get things done. And there are a number of studies that show that multitasking decreases productivity by 40%. So
Wow.
we think we're like, okay, I'm doing all this stuff. It's getting, it's getting done so fast. But in actuality, if we do things one at a time, which I like to call single tasking, we do things one at a time, we actually are far more efficient and far more accurate.
Now, can I ask to that though? Because I know that I would say I wouldn't call it multitasking, but I'm very efficient with my time. So while I might be doing editing on something, I could be doing something else because it's not taking that space, if that makes any sense. So instead of just, or let's say that I'm listening to something and I need to know whether it's going to be okay from beginning to end, but just instead of sitting there in front of the computer, I'll maybe, ride my bike or I'll my stationary bike.
Right.
But
Yeah.
you see what I'm saying is that some people would say, oh, that's multitasking. I would say, no, that's using your time efficiently.
Yeah. So you bring up a really good point. Like, this kind of multitasking where you're using different modalities, right? So like we can all go for a run and listen to a podcast. We can drive and listen to an audiobook. You can do editing while on your exercise bike. Like we could have a phone we can be on a conference call while walking on a treadmill, right? Like these are all things we can do because they're the different modalities of our brain. But if you try to use the same modality, right? So like, I think we've all had this experience, right? Where you're on a call with somebody and you're trying to type an email at the same time, right? And what you tend up typing is like exactly what verbatim what this person is saying you in the phone, even though like that is not at all what you're trying to do, right? And that's the kind of the multitasking that doesn't work. So I think what a lot of people are, they're like, oh, I did this thing, and then like, oh, I thought of something else, and I opened up another tab, and now I'm doing that thing, and then somebody's asking me a question over here, and now I'm responding to that, and then we just like never make it back to the original task.
It's so true.
Yeah, I mean, I was always a big list maker.
Mm-hmm.
And, like in the morning, I said, okay, then 1, 2, 3, 4, and I try to, in theory, try to go that route. But then I'm working on something, I get a phone call,
Mm-hmm.
then I've got to make 2 more phone calls,
Right.
to get an answer, to call them back and give them an answer, and so, oh, what are you doing? I'm multitasking, so-and-so called in. Well, like you say, you're off over here, and what you're working on is just sitting there.
Right.
Because you can't go back to it if you're still having to do this other stuff. So,
Right.
It's a lot of distractions.
A lot of distractions. Yeah. And there's a pretty shocking, I mean, I guess it's not shocking. It's demoralizing, but maybe we shouldn't be shocked by it. But there was a study out of UC Irvine several years ago that showed that 1, we get distracted every 11 minutes on average. 2, every time we get distracted, so whether that's our own brains, like going to check our email in the middle of doing something else, or whether it's a ding or a ping or somebody phone calling, whatever it is, it takes us on average 23 minutes, not 23 seconds, 23 minutes to refocus on what we're doing. And so you can see it's like this Sisyphusian effort, right? It's like we just don't get back. And so it results in most people losing about 1/3 of their workday just to this distraction cycle.
And I get that because
Yeah.
if I'm doing something that I really don't like,
Yeah.
I will take probably about 50 breaks in between before I get it done. And I'm thinking, oh, you're doing something, just, you're taking away from the time doing it instead of sitting and just getting it done. And yet I feel better doing that because I thought, oh my goodness, if I sat for 10 hours straight doing this, I wouldn't have had as much fun during the day on those little stupid things I was doing.
Well, we do have to balance it, right? Like we have to balance it with enjoyment.
But for me, if I had a couple of things I really didn't want to do that I just hated doing, I would try to force myself to do those first to get them out of the way. Because knowing they're there and doing something else, I got to do that later. It's easier just to try to get them done first thing out of the way. Then it kind of freed up my day to do things I wanted or had to do that weren't a pain.
Right. That strategy that you're talking about right there, we call eating the frog, which is basically it comes from a Brian Tracy book by the same name, but basically if it's kind of like if eating a frog is on your to-do list, is it better to do first thing in the morning and just get it out of the way? Or is it better to like fret and worry about it all day long and then still have to eat a frog at 6 p.m.?
I,
I
I
like
think it was,
that.
I think it was Brian Tracy, but I may be wrong. One of his things he said is, if you want to be productive, when you're doing something, think about, is what I'm doing getting me closer to my goal?
Mhm,
If it's
mhm.
not, stop and do what gets you closer to your goal.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
was him. It was
yeah.
something along those lines.
Yeah, pretty. It's good advice. It's good advice. Whoever it comes from.
So what would be, I have a question, with your clients, would you have a really neat story of somebody that was really difficult to get them on the time management track?
Well, I think everybody has struggled, right? I mean, I think it's interesting when I work with people, right? It's people who are like very motivated to change, because I think you don't get, like nobody teaches you how to manage your time. Nobody, these are not skills we learn in college. And so I think a lot of times by the time somebody gets to me, they're feeling like, why have I not, like, I tried everything. Now I need to hire someone to help me with this, because like that is the only option. So people are usually pretty motivated, but that doesn't mean it's easy for them. One story that I love is actually one of my very first clients, and he just came to me. He was super stressed. He was like a tech executive working, probably working 2 of those 3-hour shifts a day, essentially, right? Like working about 14, 16 hours a day. And then what happened over time was it was a little bit hard for him, but he started implementing all these strategies that we're talking about, started learning about himself and how he worked best. And eventually what I love is one of the HR people at this tech giant that he worked for came up to him and said, hey, like, why are you so much better at using your time than all the other directors in this group? Like, what is that? And he was just like glowing, right? Because he had felt like he had gone from, 0 to hero, right? And he basically said, oh, it's all this coaching that I received around this stuff.
It's wonderful.
Something interesting, you said some of your clients are Google.
Oh yeah. I work with a lot of big clients. Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
I would have thought Google would, they're the biggie, how could those guys need help?
Well, because it's made up of humans, right? and humans need help with this stuff, right? And so I mean, I think that a lot of, so I do workshops for, companies like Google and Lyft and other things, and I've worked with a lot of their individual, managers and things like that. But I think that like we're all just humans, and we're all doing the best we can. And I think a lot of my clients have come to me at a point where they have achieved success through brute force, right? They have achieved success through just working really hard and being smart and like pushing. And by the time they get to me, they're like, yeah, great, I got the success, but like, where's my life, right? Like they may have done so at the expense of a personal life or stress in their personal lives, right? And they're looking for an easier way to do this. So a way where they can still achieve the same level of success, but to make it with less effort and less stress on their part.
I could see that though in the technology business, because when you're doing, I've done tons of websites, and you're sitting there and you think, oh my goodness, I've just been 10 hours on this and it seems like it was 1 hour. So you get or programming would be the same thing. Mm-hmm. And it's also in programming hard to leave it because you're in the middle of it. Keep being in the middle of it. So those would be, I'm sure there's several different places, but that would make sense to me in Google when you're in that surrounding where you need to really be aware of the time you're sitting at your computer or doing whatever you're doing. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and even, large companies in general, right? Like tech companies, they still can be large companies, and large companies have a lot of bureaucracy, right? And there's still a lot of meetings to contend with, and we've still got to communicate upwards, outwards, and all around. We still have like our quarterly planning processes that are, pretty lengthy. And so it's we can think of it like, oh, these tech companies are like a different breed, but the bigger you get, you're just like a big company, right? And there's the same, as it's easy to be lean and mean when you're small. And then as you grow, there's additional layers essentially that people are needing to do.
You brought up an interesting point about meetings.
Oh my gosh.
To me, most meetings I've sat through are time wasters.
Yep.
Because you have 30 minutes of actual business you could have conducted, but it's an hour and a half. because the person running the meeting doesn't have an agenda. He doesn't, you know, he doesn't run the meeting runs him.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yep, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I have a workshop for clients called Making Meetings Better. And it is about a lot of those things. So not only like how do we be more efficient and have agendas and all of that stuff, but also like what meetings belong on our calendars in the first place.
Yeah, I used to do some, and I always felt like when you go into a meeting, of course, back in the days of pagers, turn your pager off. Because
Yeah.
it's when it goes off, beep, 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 everybody's like, you know, then it came cell phones, and everybody's got their cell phone, and they're either scrolling through Facebook or somebody's calling, yeah, okay, yeah, okay, you know, and to me, it's rude, it's disruptive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with you.
She said, you know, do not bring your cell phone, turn it off. But then the other thing that drove me nuts, 10 o'clock meeting, I'm the only one there.
Mm-hmm.
10:05, 2, 3, 10:50. So I got to where at 10 o'clock, I just shut the door and lock it. And then the next time we had a meeting, they were there at 9:45.
Yeah, people don't want to cross you after that.
I wouldn't open it. I wouldn't open it. You know, this is 10 o'clock. I'm here. We're going to start at 10, not 10:01, not 10. My time is valuable. So this is it. And
That's
then
tough love for those employees.
people say, hey,
He's still like that.
if he's having a meeting, you better be there 15 minutes early and don't take your cell phone.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. You know, it's interesting, right? Because different offices have different cultures around, you know, there's a big trend that I've been seeing lately that people actually schedule the meeting to start at 5 minutes after. So it's like because so many people are in back-to-backs all these days. And, you know, we tried ending early and that didn't work. And so now people are just, you know, I have a number of clients who, if you want to book a time with them, it's from 10:05 to 10:30, you know, and they're always 5 minutes after, just to give people a little break in between also between all these back-to-backs.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, I work with clients to do a meeting audit a lot because meetings are additive, right? All these recurring meetings, they just get put on our calendar. And I think you're right. Most of them aren't worth their weight in salt, you know? And even just saying that, you know, I call it like the 3 R's of a meeting audit, which are remove, like what can you just remove yourself from entirely? You don't need to go. Maybe you can delegate someone to go on your behalf, or maybe this meeting just doesn't need to happen, right? Like I think a lot of status update meetings fall into this camp. Like if it's just going to be status information, we can send an email. Mm-hmm. And then after you've done that, you got to see where you can reduce. So what can you reduce in frequency, or what can you reduce in length? You know, could we take that 90-minute meeting, add a really, you know, tight agenda and do it in 30 or 45 minutes instead? And then finally, how can we rearrange what's left? Because I think a lot of people look at their calendars and it just looks like Swiss cheese, right? It's like there's meetings all over and there's little holes, and it doesn't give anybody that time to just get into the flow or deep work. You know, you can do email and some little things in a half hour between meetings, but you can't really get into the real work of your job typically in that amount of time.
Yeah, I always liked having an agenda, send them to everybody, be prepared. This is what we're going to cover.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to have a responsibility in this, be prepared for your part, you know.
Yep. Yeah.
And,
yeah.
oh, I don't know. What do you think? Oh, I don't know. What do you think? Oh, let's ask Lorianne what she thinks. No. Yeah. Lorianne's not on the agenda.
Right.
Alexis is. She's talking. Lorianne's listening. Move on.
Yeah. It is funny that the agenda, it seems like such an obvious thing, right? Like we should, if we're going to spend time to meet, we should have an agenda and we should know why we're spending everyone's time here, right? But just the other day, I was talking to one of my clients and I was saying, how good is your executive assistant at, you know, pushing back on meetings and saying no to the things? I'm like, are there any criteria about what gets on your calendar? And he was like, she's okay, you know, she's okay at it. And I said, do meetings ever get on your calendar without an agenda? And he said, oh yeah, all the time. And I was like, well, that's the easy rule. You just tell her no meeting, you know, no agenda, no meeting. Like it doesn't get put on your calendar unless there is an agenda. And I was like, I will bet you that this will get 80% of those new requests off because people are not going to make the agenda. So the meeting's just not going to get on your calendar.
Oh,
it's interesting because, well, just quickly, because Roy and I have been in groups, and Roy and I are both in that old school, I guess. It shouldn't be old school, but we felt like it was old school of doing the agenda. And it came with, weren't open to that. It seemed like it was a struggle for us to even say, look at, this meeting can be exactly what you're saying. It can be shortened as long as we have an agenda instead of going here, there, everywhere and spending an hour and a half. And at the end of it, you're going, did we even accomplish anything?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And we didn't. So, but it was hard to convince the group. And I know that it's a volunteer group, but to me, I don't mind. I've been in volunteer organizations. I think it's it's very important that an agenda is on one of those ones, because you can't go on for hours.
Because you're not getting paid for that time, right?
No.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I once had a friend told me a long time ago, this image has just stuck in my head, that anytime you're about to schedule a meeting, you should imagine yourself unboxing a new MacBook Pro and throwing it out the window, because that's how much this is costing, right? Like if you get all these people in a room, you're using their time, like there is a dollar value assigned to that. And if we don't use that time well, it's just like burning cash.
Wow.
Oh, I totally agree.
Now I'm going to see that every time too.
It's burned in my brain.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's hard to do anything by committee. It's just hard to do.
Yeah.
Everybody's got input. Everybody, it's just hard to accomplish anything.
Yeah, and I think, and also on the flip side of that, like what is the proverb? If you want to go fast, go alone, and if you want to go far, go together, or something like that. And so I think like collaboration does have its value, right? Like most of the companies out there would not have been would not be as successful as they are without that. But I think we do need guardrails, right? We need structure. We need to know going in, is this a decision meeting where we're trying to get to a specific thing? Or is it a discussion meeting where we're trying to kind of hash things out? Like we need to know why we're meeting, and we need to avoid that situation where like we meet this week and then next week we have what feels like Groundhog's Day of the exact same meeting because we didn't decide on anything, and then nobody did anything in the interim, and now we're just meeting again and talking about the exact same stuff.
Yeah, we used to do like what we call ideas or / problems. Everybody would just submit a bunch, all it was just problems or ideas, and that's it. And then we get all those together, make a list of them, then we go the next time for the solution meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what about this? No, cross that off. And work through them that way instead of just sitting there. We could do this. No, I don't want to do that. So we tried to, as best we could, throw the ideas out there and then go back later and come to solutions.
Mm-hmm.
And that did save a lot of wasted time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it gives people time to think about it in the interim, right?
Yeah.
So Alexa, do you not agree to when somebody has an agenda in a meeting, it's so much fun ticking them off?
Yeah, I mean, I love that. I mean, I love getting the dopamine. Like, that's why I love task management systems too, right? There is like a true dopamine hit that you get from chick, 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 whether you do it in an app and you get that nice little tingle sound, or whether you do it on paper and you get to cross it off, like there is something deeply satisfactory about it.
I agree. I used to have my to-do list, and then at the end of the day, I'd go, oh man, look, I had 20 items. I got through 15 of them, I mean, I was thrilled every time I could put that red line through there. You're right.
Really,
I accomplished something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can see your progress. I think that's, a lot of people have kind of this sense of they're working, but they can't see the progress, right? Because, a lot of times people are just like keeping stuff in their head, and then it's, it's kind of hard to quantify, or because, we start the day with email instead of eating the frog. And then what happens is we can just get into this responsive mode and we're working all day long, yet we didn't check anything off the list because it's just a cycle of reactionary things that we're doing.
Yeah, we're checking our email, then we're doing a little work, then we're going to Facebook. Then
and stay off TikTok.
Do a little bit of work, then we're going to Twitter. So that's another, in my opinion, issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that the interesting thing is, I would say that like the vast majority of my clients do not have an issue with, messing around on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, or anything else during the workday. Like that is not something that they struggle with. It's more the actual, like the structure of how they're planning to get things done, right? Are they just reacting, or are they planning and thinking through things, as well as just the massive demands on their time from meeting, you know, like it's not atypical for me to start working with a client who is literally in 40 hours of recurring meetings a week and gets 300 emails a day. Like that's pretty normal as a starting place, right? And so if you look at that, you're like, well, yeah, like how are you going to get your job done? And in a reasonable amount of time, if those are the demands, right? Or that they are the demands from the top, right?
Yeah.
That's where calendars are so important too. I remember when I was the Energizer Bunny, as we're talking about, bringing up my kids, full-time job, and same type of thing, meetings and the interruptions in between that and the emails. And if it wasn't for back then, yes, my Palm Pilot, I would not have survived.
Right. Right. Because like our brains aren't meant to hold that information, right? We have so much. I think that, you know, this is a really old stat, so I'm sure it's like much worse now. But I think that it was like from 10 years ago, it said we intake like 200 times more information than we did 20 years in the past, right? Every day, we're just like 200 times. Our brains are not meant to store that. Like it's really, really difficult to try to remember what you're like, what are all the things you have to do? Who are all the people that you need to follow? Who are you waiting on things for? And what does your schedule look like? And then somehow make it to all of these things. And then throw in like personal email and all those emails you get from school about permission slips and all of this stuff. And if people are just relying on their brains, which a lot of people are, it's stressful and it doesn't work, right?
Mhm.
And it's cute because a lot of people make this joke and like my parents are in their 80s. My mom goes, oh, you see, I'm getting old, I forget. And I said, forget that. I had to have my calendar from the time I was in my 20s.
Yeah.
It's just because there's so much to process. And I said, and the older you get, the more is in there and more files that don't get deleted that you'd like to, but they're still there.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Me too. I'm 40 and like I don't even know what's going on if I don't have my, you know, if I'm not looking at my calendar. Like my goal is to not remember any of that. My goal is to offload that so that I can use my brain to focus on the actual work, the things that I'm trying to do, instead of having your brain go, you know, you're working on something and then your brain's like, oh yeah, milk's running out in the fridge, or, you know, 2 minutes later, my passport's going to expire in 7 years, or like whatever, you know, whatever your brain wants to think about, having a place, like a single place to put all of that stuff so that you can prioritize it linearly, I think is really helpful.
It's like me. If I'm so full, if I learn something new, I got to forget something to make room for it. It's maxed out. I mean,
Right.
I'm at full capacity.
Right, exactly. That's why templates are important, and you know, all this stuff, so we don't have to recreate that stuff.
So Alexis, what's your one piece of advice for the majority of people about productivity?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just coming back to that. It's never rely on your memory. Like that is just a losing battle. I think so many people keep so much in their heads, and it feels really stressful because you constantly have this kind of like anxiety in the back of your head that says, I know I'm forgetting something. I just don't know what it is or when it's going to come back to bite me. Yeah. And we just kind of go through with that low level or maybe high level anxiety all the time. So that and turning off notifications would be like, if anyone's listening today, it's like use a task system of some sort, any old app will do, and just turn off all the notifications. Like you don't need a ding or a ping every time somebody emails you. Like you can process your email a few times a day, or maybe more than that. But every time you get one of those dings or pings, just imagine 23 minutes being siphoned off from your life.
How can our listeners reach out to you?
Yeah, so they can get me at my website. It's alexishaselberger.com, which I hope you'll put in the show notes because you know it's a mouthful. Or I'm on Instagram at do.more.stress.less, or Facebook at do more stress less.
Okay, great.
This was wonderful. Really appreciate this, and
it was.
Your advice to people. I think it's very important. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. It was a pleasure.